Good morning, everyone. Welcome to First Take. Carrie Champion here with Skip Bayless in studio. Stephen A. Smith is in New York City. Good morning, Stephen A.
Good morning. How y'all doing?
We're doing well.
It's a big news day, and I can't wait.
Lots to discuss on the show today. Plenty of developments with the NFL regarding domestic violence. Just a few days after the elevator video became public, Roger Goodell was asked by CBS News, why didn't the NFL see the video or at least make every attempt to view it? Here's his response.
How is it that the NFL couldn't get their hands on this second tape, but a website called TMZ could?
Well, I don't know how TMZ or any other website gets their information. We are particularly relying on law enforcement. That's the most reliable. It's the most credible. And we don't seek to get that information from sources that are not credible.
Is domestic violence more widespread than in the general public? Do you look at the NFL and say, I'm the commissioner, we've got a problem?
Absolutely. We're saying we have a problem. We have one incident, that's a problem. And what we want to do is, by the policy that we implemented 2 weeks ago, is say, we haven't done this right. We have had lots of conversations, lots of listening and learning right here in this room with experts, not just in the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks or month, but over the last couple of years, to say, how can we deal with this issue better?
How can we get this better? So today, this morning on First Take, we're having a conversation. No debate, just what we see and what we heard, and just simple reactions. Stephen A., you're up first.
Well, what I take from that is that Roger Goodell acknowledges that he dropped the ball. And I think that that's important. When you're the commissioner of the National Football League, which is a multi-billion-dollar establishment, you got 1,800 players at the very least to oversee, along with 32 owners watching over you. It's the #1 sport in the nation, and obviously it has an incredible impact on us, on our society, simply because of how it affects the youth and how influential the actions of professional athletes and beyond can be. The league that governs them definitely has to take the kind of stance that the NFL has taken. I definitely think that even though the NFL dropped the ball, however, and they're considerably late to the party, I do think that Roger Goodell deserves a lot of credit for acknowledging his mea culpa, for being open about it, for acknowledging that he indeed made a mistake with giving Ray Rice a two-game suspension in July. I also think that he added to that by pointing out that, again, they didn't put forth the necessary due diligence. I know that we understand that the Baltimore Ravens did the same thing, Skip, when they said that they essentially listened to Ray Rice and his wife, Janae. They heard what transpired, and they didn't diligently pursue the second video that ultimately came out a couple of days ago, and that they made a mistake in that. They clearly was relying on the words of Ray Rice and his wife, along with their attorneys, along with the NFL Players Association, and they were also leaning on Ray Rice's history, which up to this point had been relatively pristine. He was considered a pillar of the community in Baltimore, never gotten into any trouble, didn't have any issues whatsoever, was very charitable and philanthropic with his time, his effort, his energy, and to some degree, from what I'm hearing, his dollars. So all those things taken into consideration, they gave him the benefit of the doubt, as opposed to just simply doing a thorough investigation. So to come out and to implement the domestic violence policy that calls for an automatic 6-game suspension for a first-time offender and a lifetime ban for a second-time offender, obviously open to appeal, of course, and to make sure that you retroactively went back and said, you know what, the 2-game suspension is not enough, that it calls for an indefinite suspension after the Baltimore Ravens let him go. Considering that, along with the fact that Roger Goodell wisely made himself available to both CBS and to Christine Brennan of USA Today, I definitely think that the steps are being taken in the right direction, and we move on from here.
I'm not so sure about that. I must tell you that on two levels, on 2 points that the commissioner made in 2 different interviews, I was offended because I felt like the commissioner was insulting the intelligence of thinking NFL fans everywhere. And maybe the blindly loyal NFL fans will buy into what the commissioner is saying. They'll let it go in one eye and out the other, and onward and upward to Sunday or Thursday night, I should say, because that's the next night, and pretty much push all this back under the carpet where it was before. I can't do that. Let's do two different points. He used the word with Christine Brennan, did Roger Goodell. I suspected there was a second video. You suspected there was. He was in an Atlantic City casino in which we all know you are constantly videotaped in elevators or wherever you are around the gaming tables.
There was more than one video.
Yeah.
There were
so you suspected there was another one?
Yeah.
You're insulting my intelligence with the word suspected. You knew there was another video. And then we've gone on and on about this. Stephen A. has made great points about knowing NBA security. I have known several NFL security directors, starting with Larry Wansley of the Dallas Cowboys, still there, once the bodyguard of Whitney Houston, but he's a former FBI agent. So you're telling me that the most powerful league, certainly in American sports, a league that's well known to have been connected to law enforcement in every city, did not have the means to acquire the video it suspected was inside the elevator? Really? Yeah. So after we saw the video, and after the commissioner saw the video of Ray Rice dragging his wife out of the elevator, now you have to wonder what happened inside the elevator. So now I'm on to point number 2. The commissioner says now that it was ambiguous what was told to him by Ray Rice, his representatives, and a lawyer for the NFL Players Association. It was ambiguous, indicating that he, the commissioner, was misled or given less than the truth, or maybe just flat out lied to by Ray Rice and company.
Perhaps.
Perhaps. Well, come on. Well, what do you think he's going to do to save himself and to keep it at 2 games instead of 8 games or a whole year? What did you think you were going to hear from an abuser that was Ray Rice? And again, I don't want to get into the gory details of this, what he might or might not have said, because the commissioner would not provide any details of exactly what he was or was not told. But I'm sorry, I'm not buying that you listened to Ray and you listened to the NFLPA attorney and you nodded along and said, okay, that's fine. You get only 2 games. Really? You didn't suspect there was more to the story? You couldn't put 2 plus 2 together to equal 4? Why did you have to drag her out of the elevator? I'm very offended by that he effectively is throwing Ray Rice under the bus, because I'm not buying that. You got to be smarter than that when it comes to domestic abuse cases. It's almost like you're still living in the dark ages when it comes to these kinds of incidents. Yeah. So I'm not buying. I'm not buying either of those points.
But what we're seeing is, and you guys are getting to it, and we've talked about it, domestic abuse is uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to talk about. It's uncomfortable to witness. And from my understanding, or from what I can gather, that's why the league didn't pursue the video. That was that willful ignorance. No one wanted to talk about it. It could just go away. If I use the 2-game suspension as I've done in the past with other ones, that's where he lands. That's where he is. He's okay with that. And you were talking about Christine Brennan. I'm looking at an article that she wrote. She said, treat off-camera abusers same as Ray Rice. Moving forward, what does the NFL do?
Well, hang on.
Yeah, I'm not moving. I'm not going there. But what does the NFL do next? Like, they have to acknowledge the wrong. Okay. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
What, do you want to go?
No, I want Stephen A.
Okay, go Stephen A.
I want everybody to stop with the naivete. That's what I want. Let's be real about something here. Nobody is saying that we watched Roger Goodell and we believed that those somersaults he was doing to avoid revealing all of this information, that he's speaking the truth and nothing but the truth, so help him God. We understand he was being evasive. We understand he was engaged in CYA mode, covering his you-know-what.
Thank you.
We get all that.
We
understand that. In no way did I mean to imply with my opening comments that Roger Goodell stood up there and was Honest Abe, for crying out loud. That's not where I'm going here. But can we stop with the naivete? He is the commissioner of a multi-billion-dollar establishment. overseen by 32 owners, okay? The NFL is the #1 sport in the world. They have grown exponentially in popularity. The money is coming out the wazoo so significantly, ladies and gentlemen, that the NFL is in a position to charge performers for their halftime Super Bowl performance. Oh, not pay them, charge them. You want to perform, you have to pay us. That's how pathetic it has become in terms of the NFL's willingness to money grab for everything. So if you find yourself in a situation where there is a tape out there that could ultimately impugn and sully the integrity of the league, what is going to be your default position? We ain't boo-boo the fools. We know what's going on here. The man was, to me, where Roger Goodell would be egregious to the point of deserving to be fired, is if he actually saw the video and said, I'm going to give Ray Rice the 2-game suspension anyway.
That's a whole nother
topic. And try to sweep it under the rug.
Okay,
that's
all right.
No, that's a whole nother topic.
Okay,
but without that, ladies and gentlemen, without that, what he did was position himself for exactly what we're seeing. Plausible deniability.
Okay.
It happens with the government.
Yeah.
It happens in the world of big business. It's happening now. Why are we acting surprised?
Okay, but are you okay with that?
Yeah, because it happens every day.
Okay,
Skip,
all right.
It's our job to call it like we see it, but it's his job to cover himself in the league to the best of his ability. Who doesn't do that?
Skip, you're not okay with it?
Who doesn't do that? It
You're
happens
not okay
every
with
day.
it?
I am not okay with it.
No, I'm not okay with. I am not okay with Ray Rice hitting his woman, who is now obviously his wife.
Okay.
I'm saying to you that in the world of big business, people tend to look. The NBA, the NFL, everybody. What do they have? They've got PR. They've got handlers. You've got spin doctors out there. The public relations field has become a multi-billion-dollar business.
Now
it's
you're going
all
down
about
the right
spin.
path. Okay. All right. But not
That's
only
all I'm
is
saying.
Roger Goodell not Honest Abe, he is Roger Dodger today. He's dodging all these points, and I'm back to my original conclusion. You weren't here yesterday, but Stephen A. kept saying he dropped the ball. I said, no, he didn't drop it. He chose not to pick up the ball in the first place.
With it, yeah.
Why is that? Okay, this is just my 2 cents. This is strictly my opinion. I believe when it came to the domestic violence issue, back to your point, it is so uncomfortable. It can be such a slippery slope that early on this league said, hey, we're just going to stay away from it. We're going to. That's between a player and his wife, or a player and his girlfriend, or a player and his fiance, whoever it is, his significant other. That's between them. We don't really know what goes on because we get 2 sides to the story. So you know what? We're going to stay away from that one. That's their business. Maybe it's legal business. We'll let the court decide. And obviously, in this case, the court decided to give Ray Rice no more than anger management. And we're under the impression, it's reported that they did see the inside the elevator tape. Okay, that's a whole nother issue. And obviously, Roger Goodell can still fall back on that and say, well, gee, the court, we have the law on our side because the court ruled that he only deserved anger management. So we didn't look that bad when we just gave him 2 games.
Oh, well, although he said it is up to the NFL to set standards.
Absolutely it is. But I'm saying that's one out. That's one excuse. But to me, the bigger picture here is that they chose not to involve themselves, and how many of these domestic violence issues do we know about in the past?
Sure.
There's some pending right now, a Greg Hardy and Ray McDonald, okay? And again, I can go back, but we don't have enough time on this show to tell you how many domestic abuse issues that I've had to deal with in my career that pretty much got swept under the carpet by several leagues that I've covered, because it's like that's not really our business here. We're not sure what to do with that. Okay, it's time to be enlightened about this, and I think we are all being a little more enlightened.
Okay, so Stephen A., back to his point, he said Roger Goodell set himself up for plausible deniability by not seeing this video. I have a question. Help me out here. Did he not think, did top brass not think, did the think tank of the NFL not think that this video inside of the elevator would not eventually come out? Was it just arrogance? if he's setting himself up for plausible deniability, I don't see how they didn't think what happened inside of that elevator would make its way to the public.
Okay, but again, to Stephen A's point, he's saying that then they can say, well, we tried to get it and we couldn't. They surely knew, like I used the word, he told Christine, I suspected there was you knew there was a second video from inside the elevator because it's in a casino. So did you try very hard to acquire the second tape? I say no. Do I know that for a fact? I don't. But all my instincts of having covered this league for, 35 years now, this league is so connected that there's no way that TMZ is going to acquire the second video before the NFL acquires it. I'm sorry, I'm not buying that one.
All right. Stephen A., you want to add?
Well, the one thing that Roger Goodell needs to be incredibly embarrassed over on a far less insidious level, obviously compared to just the whole Ray Rice fiasco, is that TMZ got a video that the NFL didn't get. There's simply no excuse for that. There's just no excuse for that. And all of these things about, well, the law says, it's grand jury testimony, and as a result, it's the property of law enforcement officials, and you can't get a hold of it. You're the NFL. If you wanted it bad enough, you could have gotten it. It's that simple. And Roger Goodell could explain it until the cows come home. I still don't think he's somebody that should be fired over this.
Sure.
But I do believe that the NFL could have gotten a hold of this video if it really, really used the full weight of the National Football League to do it. And they didn't in this instance.
Stephen A. Smith,
and they're getting what they deserve.
Would you agree, in the bigger picture, that the NFL has never looked worse than it looks right now? It just in taint.
Yes.
I agree.
Yes.
I agree.
Would you agree?
Yes,
I agree.
Absolutely. I tweeted the other day. I was like, it's
and
a sad day for the league.
And
Very
be clear,
sad.
y'all.
Yeah, go ahead.
Be clear, y'all. It's the league that looks bad.
Yes.
Not the players.
No, it's the league.
See, usually we talk about the players.
That's true.
This is the league office.
Yep, you're right.
These are those executives. They look very bad. Not the players.
All right. Recovering, moving forward. Do you want to add something before we get out of here? You want to talk about what's next? Are we going to go here?
Let's wait and we'll do it the next. We're going to revisit this at the top of next hour.
We have a lot to talk about, you guys. It's a lot to weigh in on this topic. A lot of different angles, a lot of different things have happened again, like I said, overnight. So we're going to, again, just have a conversation, weigh in on what we think is happening. All right, Floyd Mayweather, who spent 2 months in a Las Vegas jail back in 2012 for pleading guilty to reduced domestic abuse charges stemming from an attack on his former girlfriend while children watched, is also weighing in on Ray Rice. He said he believes that the NFL should have stayed with its original 2-game suspension and asked for his own innocence or guilt when it comes to domestic abuse. He says he was falsely accused. Like I've said in the past, no bumps, no bruises, no nothing. With OJ and Nicole, you've seen pictures. With Chris Brown and Rihanna, you've seen pictures. With Chad Ochocinco and Evelyn, you've seen pictures. You guys have yet to see any pictures of a battered woman, a woman who says she was kicked and beaten by me. So I just live my life and try to stay positive and try to become a better person each and every day. All right, Stephen A., we're putting Floyd Mayweather on the hook. What do you make of those comments?
I'm disgusted with them. I'll be the first to say that. A lot of people here, particularly so many people who watch this show, know that I know Floyd Mayweather Jr. pretty well. He's somebody that I've interviewed on several occasions. I'm one of the few people, I guess, at least in the world of the media, that he's confided in on a personal level on several occasions. And I know a lot of the personal demons that, he's experienced that I would never repeat without his permission. Because, again, he has confided in me about a lot of personal things that have gone on in his life. Having said all of that, the bottom line is that a Las Vegas judge sentenced you to 90 days in jail back in December of 2011, and you served your time in 2012 of June after you pleaded guilty to a domestic violence charge and no contest to 2 harassment charges. You spent time in jail. Floyd Mayweather sat in front of me and talked about how he survived because he literally remembered a story about an individual that was in jail for years and he remembered reading about how the guy said he had survived by talking to the cockroaches that were in the jail with him. And he said if that man was strong enough to make it through, then he was going to be strong enough too. To hear those kind of stories, to know how riveting those stories can be to an individual psyche, particularly somebody with just the demons in his past that Floyd Mayweather has had, you would think that there's a level of heightened sensitivity that he would have. And in this particular instance, I don't think that I'm hearing that here. To intimate that, it's too much of a big deal being made of this. It's one thing to say what Chris Canty said, the defensive end for the Baltimore Ravens, Skip, when he said he doesn't believe that the video should be shown over and over and over on television because there's a heightened level of sensitivity and courtesy that should be accorded to Janae Palmer Rice, the wife of Ray Rice. We understood that, and there was absolutely positively nothing offensive about what Chris Canty was saying. As a matter of fact, some would say he's right, and his level of emotion and sensitivity was heartfelt, sincere, and should be deeply appreciated. But in the case of Floyd Mayweather, it comes across as if he's saying, why even bother making this a big deal? Well, that means you don't think it's a big deal. And if you don't think it's a big deal, and you've got this track record, then it's going to give people a license to look at your history and say, well, maybe you're guilty of the things you swore you were innocent of simply because of the nonchalant attitude you have towards this. So as a guy that I know, that I've spoken to, that I plan on speaking to again and definitely watching this Saturday night when he fights Marcos Maidana in his rematch, what I would say to Floyd face to face if I saw him is, what the hell is wrong with you? Why would you say such a thing? Just pump the brakes, be quiet. You don't need to be speaking on this issue unless you want people to perceive you as what the court system obviously perceived you as, despite your denials.
I cannot express to you how much I appreciate your stance on this, because I know for a fact how much you like this man. In and out of the ring. You like a lot of things about him. You like his style. You like his swagger. You love to watch him fight. I'll be honest.
And there are things I don't like about him either, but he knows that too.
I know that, but this is where we always have to draw that line when we're doing this show and separate the athlete or the entertainer from the flawed human being. This is a very flawed human being. I love to watch him fight, and I will be the first to admit I will watch him on Saturday night because I always watch him. I'm a boxing fan. But I can separate, and I've said on the show many times, I don't like Floyd the guy. I don't like his style. I don't like his swagger. I don't like his referring to himself in the third person. It's on and on. I don't like all that. But he is a showman. He is an entertainer, and he's extremely gifted at his craft of boxing, as you always say. Greatest defensive fighter in the history of the sport. Fine. Now back to what he said. All that said. What he said was cold-blooded, callous, brazen, arrogant denial. And it is consistent behavior with that of many abusers past. This is what they do. I didn't really do that. Do you have pictures? You don't have pictures.
Do you have pictures?
You have pictures?
Get out of here.
Three incidents that went to some kind of trial. And you don't have pictures? Don't need pictures. You got convicted. You pled out of what could have been a much longer sentence. And yet, Stephen A., I got to tell you, just in the framework of what we're discussing on the show today, the enlightenment of America when it's now coming to domestic violence and abuse, just as Ray Rice has now become the face of domestic violence, to me, Floyd is the face of an abuser now. You get to see it in full throat because you get to,
what he just said?
What he just said. You can see it, you can hear it. I mean, we don't get to see it on camera, but if you read these words, you can say, aha, that's the behavior of a serial abuser, right? That's how they react. I mean, and I've read this before about other abusers.
But he's also taking an attitude that a lot of people are taking. Abuse not caught on camera or seen isn't abuse.
Is okay, yeah.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't exist. Yeah, so you're saying he's becoming the face of abusers based on what he said.
That's exactly what you hear from other abusers. And again, I followed yesterday on Twitter thanks to your tip, actually.
Sure.
You know,
Hashtag why
I left and why I stayed.
Yes.
And I read so much of similar behavior on the part of the abusers that was tweeted from the abused. And you could just see it. They're in denial. I didn't really do that.
Yeah.
I didn't do that. It wasn't that bad. It wasn't really that bad. You have a picture?
Okay.
And I want to know, what was your initial reaction when you read Floyd's quotes?
And then making sure that I'm being professional, but still very honest.
Mm-hmm.
It was arrogant, and it was disgusting. Stephen A. said it was disgusting. He was right on when he said it, and I understand how he feels about him. I think, unfortunately, in the day and age we live in, so many people give Floyd Mayweather a pass because he is so skilled and he is so great. And it's an individual sport. It's not a team sport.
That's
so he's not held accountable like someone else would be if he was on a team, if he played with others, and it affected the entire team. It's himself. And there's a lot of glitz and glam associated with him. So men, in fact, do like what he does. He's women as well. And I'm putting women on the hook here too, because as we know, you called him an abuser. His behavior is well documented, and there will still be women who will date him. There will still always be a woman who will try to be in his world, knowing that because he has the money, because he's flashy, because he is one of the greats. But when I read this, it's disgusting. It's moronic. He's so arrogant about abuse. There are no photos. Now, for me, that's just completely disrespectful. You're talking about a dead woman here. Nicole Brown is dead. There are no photos.
And by the way, this also smacks of the child's excuse of, yeah, but mom or dad, everybody's doing it. So that's what he's basically saying. Well, they're all doing it, but you just don't know about it because there are no pictures, there's no video inside someone's house or wherever they were that they abused somebody. Well, baloney. Just because they got away with it and Ray Rice didn't because he got busted on video is no excuse. So in the big picture, how do you react now? Does this make you not want to watch Floyd box anymore?
No, now, and it doesn't. And that's where a lot of we find ourselves in that conundrum. We don't say we don't like your behavior, but yet we still want to watch you. I'll still watch Floyd.
You will.
I still watch Floyd. I can't get on a soapbox and say I'm not going to watch him by the nature of what I do for a living. I don't like who he is as a person. And unfortunately, we find ourselves in the business that we are in right now, having to analyze a person's behavior and separating who he is in the ring and out of the ring.
Can you now do that with Floyd?
No, when I think about Floyd, I don't think I think he's a very, and again, let me find my words, I think he is a very hard person to like. He is extremely arrogant, and that is what people love about him. But for him to say there are no pictures, as you said, he's a face. He would be the face of an abuser, and I understand where you're going with that. It's hard, and Stephen A., I'm trying to find the right words because I don't want to vilify him, but I don't want to
first of all,
make it simple.
First of all, with all due respect, I think you're working too hard to try to find the right words when you don't have to. You're entitled to be appalled. You're entitled to be disgusted, and whatever natural emotions emanate from you because you're a woman and a lady, you have a right to feel that way.
Yeah.
So you don't have. I mean, don't guard yourself too much.
No,
I will say
I'm
this.
not guarding myself. But I do want to. I don't want to make it emotional. I just want to say what it is. He's not a good human being.
I understand that. All right, that's fine. For me personally, let me say this. I would love Skip Bayless to come up with some kind of defense for Floyd on this. There is none.
Yeah.
There is no excuse for this. He was totally wrong. He has nothing to do with this. I don't even know why he would say such a thing. And I'm going to tell you the part that makes this most egregious. Let me tell you something else I know about Floyd Mayweather Jr. He has daughters. Let somebody put their hands on his daughters and see how he acts. I don't know what Floyd would do to them. So by mere virtue of that reality, it should be a heightened level of sensitivity, which makes him even more wrong than you could possibly fathom. The only thing that I'd like to add about it, and this is separate and apart from Floyd and his statements, which are clearly inflammatory and just wrong. The other part that I want to make sure we understand is about this. When we talk about these guys, whether it's a boxer, whether it's a football player, one of the things that I think is worth monitoring, not excusing, not apologizing for, not giving a pass on, but one of the things that I think is worth monitoring is that boxing's a pugilistic sport.
Exactly.
Football is arguably the most violent sport of it all. The things that these guys do to get themselves hyped up and ready for the level of warfare they have to engage in, they are then obligated and insisted upon to turn around and dial all of that down. Not just with women, but with everybody. Because think about it. If I get into a fight in the street because somebody instigates something with me, well, then you got to take the evidence for what it is. Floyd gets in a fight in the street. He's a licensed boxer. His hands are considered weapons. An MMA fighter, the same thing. When you have those kind of things to deal with, you have to guard yourself even more excessively. And I think for some reason it just appears to be difficult for a lot of these guys. Some, not most, not all, but I think it's something to pay attention to. I don't know why, but I've heard people calling up on my radio show, stopping me in the streets, trying to debate with me in a barbershop, whatever the case may be. They bring stuff like this up. I don't know the answer to those questions.
Yeah.
I just know it's the kind of things that people bring up.
Well, Stephen A., do you have an answer to this question? Same thing Skip asked me, because I'm trying to find the words for it. Why do people still watch him, knowing the type of person he is?
Well, number one, he's the best in the world, and people appreciate greatness. Number two, he markets himself in the sport that way. Like, you don't want to see two friends getting in the boxing ring, hugging one another. How you doing? What's going on, man? All right, now let's go fight. You don't want to see that. The more it appears to be warfare, because it's a violent pugilistic sport, the more enticed you are to watch it. That's number two. Number three, there's a level of empathy any star boxer has, because people recognize that they have really no representation. They're on their own.
What do you mean, level of empathy?
You don't have a players union, player representation. You don't have all of that stuff in your favor. And people are sensitive to that they're on their own.
So a couple of points, Stephen A. I hear
I had
you.
an echo on my ear, by the way, so I apologize.
I know
okay.
our audio. I
Yeah.
know. Apologies.
So hang with me on this. You may have to hear it twice in your ear. I apologize.
Okay.
Good.
Go ahead.
Okay, with Floyd, even though this is pugilism, this is boxing, this is hand-to-hand combat, just a point of order on Floyd, he's such a master of the craft defensively that he's kind of above that. He doesn't really engage in that much hand-to-hand combat because he doesn't have to. He can literally outbox you. So he's not this Cro-Magnon kind of fighter that's just going to try to exchange punches with you and see who can take the most abuse. He's not going to engage in a thriller in Manila between Ali and Joe Frazier, where they're nearly going to kill each other. That's not the mentality of the man that we're talking about here. And then also back to what you pointed out, Stephen A. Floyd does have does he have daughters plural? I know he has one. Does he have two? Not sure about that, but he has at least.
I thought he had two.
Two.
I
Okay,
thought he
whatever.
had two. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay, but I love it that you brought up the classic abuser's double standard,
Which is,
hey, I can do whatever I want to my woman. I can put my hands on her if it's required. But if any man dares to put his hands on my daughter, I just might put him in the ground. You know, like it's the classic abuser's double standard. And I'm glad you brought this up, just all in the vein of shining the light on domestic violence.
Okay.
Because this is another classic behavior of the
he has 2 sons and 2 daughters.
2 daughters. Okay, there we go.
Okay. He wouldn't want his sons to be abusers, I'm sure.
Okay. So now back to Carrie's question. Can you still watch him? Well, clearly it's back to my point about you have to separate the entertainer or the athlete from the flawed human. And how many times do you go watch an actor act or a singer sing, and you know they have done despicable things, outrageous things, unspeakable things, but when you go watch them, now again, they're playing someone else. They are literally someone else besides themselves.
Yeah.
But you have to separate, because if you let your subconscious take over and keep reminding you, but he did this or she did this, or then you wouldn't be able to watch their movie or listen to their song, correct?
There's some truth to when you know more about the person you see on the screen, about their real life habits, you can't separate the two. So that's very true. I don't know. We need to leave it here.
Ferry is the general manager of the Atlanta Hawks today because there was a process. Alston and Bird interviewed 19 people. They went through 24,000 documents. They came with a conclusion that, and a recommendation for a punishment, which I took their advice and then far exceeded their advice as far as my punishment, which I've kept private. People are hurt. My biggest message is, you come and you cheer for the players. The players didn't do anything. Don't punish the players. These guys are hurting as bad as anyone. I just said to them, say what's in your heart. Feel what you have to feel. And I apologized to them. I said, you wear Atlanta on your chest. You certainly don't deserve this.
Hawks CEO Steve Koonin. Ferry has been disciplined by the CEO for making racially charged comments about Luol Deng when the team pursued the free agent this year. The team did not provide any of the details of the discipline. However, after a scouting report surfaced in which Ferry tells the ownership group that Deng is, quote, has a little African in him and was a two-faced liar and cheat, it was unfortunate. Luol Deng released a statement that which read in part, I'm proud to say I actually have a lot of African in me, not just a little. For my entire life, my identity has been a source of pride and strength. Among my family and friends in my country of South Sudan and across the broader continent of Africa, I can think of no greater privilege than to do what I love for a living while also representing my heritage on the highest stage. Unfortunately, the comment about my heritage was not made with the same respect and appreciation. Stephen A., we're talking about Ferry. Are you okay with him staying on as GM?
No, I'm not. He needs to go, but it's not because I believe he did something that was a fireable offense. If indeed Danny Ferry is telling the truth when he says that he read a scouting report, he simply made the mistake of reading what was on the scouting report and not editing himself before he read what he read. I don't think that's grounds for firing. But the reason why I think he has to go, Skip, is because I'm in the minority. By and large, the African-American community in the city of Atlanta, okay, they're not going to let it go. And the fact that Hawks CEO and co-owner Steve Koonin came out and said what he said yesterday, to me, only heightens the reality that Danny Ferry has to go. And the reason why it does is because he said, listen, people are hurting. People are upset. We apologize for that. Come root for the players. Don't punish the players. Well, you have an opportunity to manipulate that by making the decision that your patrons apparently want you to make. Danny Ferry, to me, made a mistake. Like I told you yesterday, I spoke to Billy King, black man, general manager, Brooklyn Nets, formed with the Philadelphia 76ers. I've known Billy King close to 20 years. He's a beautiful person. Billy King called Danny Ferry his best friend. Said he's known him since he was 15 years of age. Says the man was in his wedding. And says that Danny Ferry doesn't have a racist bone in his body. I've spoken to former players that played under Danny Ferry in Atlanta as well as Cleveland. They said the same thing. I've spoke to people connected to the San Antonio Spurs organization. They vouched for Danny Ferry. This notion that Danny Ferry is a racist is unfair, it's incendiary, it's excessive, it's wrong. Because if you can't prove that somebody is a racist, you have no business saying it. If you feel that way, then stand front and center and articulate why you feel that way. For somebody to have such an incendiary label attached to them, They deserve the right and the opportunity to face their accusers as opposed to people hiding behind other folks. But that doesn't negate the fact that the heat that has been brought to bear is what it is. It does not mean that Danny Ferry shouldn't be a general manager in this league. It doesn't mean he's not qualified. It doesn't mean he's done a bad job. It doesn't mean that he wouldn't do a good job for somebody else. It just means that in the city of Atlanta, you lost them. They don't want you. And if that's the reality, then you simply have to move on.
Okay, so bottom line, your position is not a racist, but for the sake of the brand of the Atlanta Hawks, the image of the Hawks, because so many in the black community in Atlanta, Georgia, have leaped to the conclusion that you do at least have racist tendencies, that it's such a bad look for the franchise that he must be gone, right?
And that's it.
Okay,
yes.
I'm with you. Now, I've had 48 hours to do some homework on this and to let it sink in deeper and deeper into my brain. And I got to tell you, I'm having some issues here. Let's reiterate what happened. The bottom line to what happened was that Danny Ferry, who did play for Duke, did make a big offer to try to sign Luol Deng, who played for Duke. So let's be fair to Danny that what the bottom line to what happened was that despite what he read to the investors over the conference call, he then went out and did his darndest to try to sign Luol Deng, correct? Because Miami slightly outbid the Atlanta Hawks, and Luol thought that in the wake of LeBron and Miami, okay, well, that might be a better fit for me and a little more money for me. But let's keep in mind, to be fair, that Danny did try to sign Luol Deng. Now, back to what happened. Stephen A. Smith, you've been doing your job for a long time. I've been doing mine for an even longer time. How many GMs have you talked to over the years? How many have I talked to in the NFL and the NBA who made some reference to how a player can be a little bit of a con artist or con man in that they present one. Yeah, how many times do you hear that? They present one face to the media, but behind closed doors, that can be a different guy. Okay, I've heard it countless times, and we've talked countless times on this show about those kinds of players. Better be careful. So, Danny Ferry calls another member of another franchise for which Luol Deng had played, doing his due diligence, doing his intel and his homework, and he says, tell me about Luol Deng. And that member of that franchise, I'm not sure what level it was, because Danny's not going to give that up. He's not going to throw that guy, whoever it was, under that bus. But he said that guy, whatever level it was, scout or executive, said blah, 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 what Kerry read.
Right.
And then Danny included that phraseology in his report that he read to the investors. Now, here's where I'm uncomfortable with how comfortable Danny was in reading to the investors. You're basically saying he has a little con man in him. But why do you have to make it racial? It disturbs me because why do you have to include the African reference? Why is it an African trait to have a storefront that looks nice but be selling counterfeit stuff out the back? You can say that in a lot of different ways, and maybe he does have a little con man in him, Luol Deng. He just might. But I don't love the phraseology, and I'm uncomfortable with how comfortable Danny would be to read that on a conference call to the investors. That's just me.
Well, my response to that is simple, Skip. Number one, you have a point. Number two, Danny Ferry's position is that he read it on a scouting report. Others that were on the conference call, 20 different people from 4 different offices in 3 different cities, Atlanta, New York, and Washington, D.C. Several of those individuals say that they don't believe that he was reading off a scouting report. And when have you ever seen a scouting report that said that? So there's some debate there as to whether he was reading a scouting report or whether or not he said it. You combine that with your discomfort from it, I can understand that. But Skip, and maybe I'm going to make people uncomfortable by saying this. I've heard many people utter or spew something racially insensitive, and I still didn't find them racist.
Okay.
That's why I can draw a line between
fair.
somebody who made a mistake, somebody who was ill-advised, somebody who is ignorant, not educated enough, at least in that realm, to know better. And I can decipher and distinguish the difference between somebody who makes a mistake and somebody where those characteristics are an innate part of who they are.
Well said.
And that's where I'm saying the difference. I am in no way trying to explain away why Danny would feel the need to read that. Danny Ferry, according to my sources, has said, I messed up big time. I should not have read that. I made a mistake. What can I do? There's nothing that I can say other than to apologize. This is what Danny Ferry has said to numerous people. My point is, for that to be the thing that we utilize to classify somebody as a racist, I think is going beyond the pale. And it's sad for me. It's sad for me, Skip, because I understand. Look, I am a black man on national television. With my mouth, I'm quite sure there's a whole bunch of white folks out there that don't like me being in this position. They don't like Kerry being in the position that she's in. Okay? But the fact of the matter is we here. It's a part of life. The flip side, however, is that we have an obligation, Skip, not only to recognize that those people are the minority. It's not everybody that's like that. We also have an obligation as black people to make sure that we distinguish the difference between somebody who is inherently racist and others who made a mistake or are a bit ignorant to the sensitivities involving African Americans. If we don't draw that line in the sand, if we don't draw that distinction, then we're going to find ourselves in a boatload of trouble, because then we're going to have to make sure we're perfect in how we articulate and elocute ourselves at every turn. And Lord knows we are capable of making mistakes in that regard.
Which is why I speak with so much caution sometimes. Caution. Let's transition, shall we? Atlanta Hawks officials are planning to meet with area civil rights activists in the wake of the racially insensitive email sent by co-owner Bruce Levinson. The email, uncovered during an investigation after Hawks GM Danny Ferry offered racially charged comments, suggested that the team's black fans were keeping its white fans away from the game. Reverend Markel Hutchins, one of the civil rights leaders in Atlanta who has secured a meeting with the Hawks, said that he wanted to examine what he believes are racist sentiments within the organization. And here is the quote: "Evidently, the culture of racism and bigotry that is pervasive and ever present in the Atlanta Hawks leadership is embarrassing to the city of Atlanta and undermines the very best of Atlanta's history of race relations and being a leader for the nation and the world." Stephen A., perspective on this, big picture. What's your perspective on the Hawks situation?
I think, first of all, Reverend Hutchins is a bit extreme in all of this.
Okay.
I don't know of the Atlanta Hawks situation being pervasive. We have one owner out of many who had an email from 2 years ago. We have this mistake that was committed by Danny Ferry. Prior to that, what did we have? I don't know what he's saying. I understand him pouncing on this particular issue to bring attention to the plight of African Americans in the sport of the NBA, because I understand where he's coming from. Throughout this USA Today article, we heard from Professor Boyd at USC, along with Reverend Hutchins and others, that were talking about, black participation. We're talking about beyond the playing field. According to Richard Lapchick, 70% black in terms of player populace in the NBA is entirely different than ownership. 30 owners, only one is black in Michael Jordan. Okay, that's an issue, because if you got a league that's 76% black, you should have more than one owner who happens to be of African American descent. There needs to be more diversity in that ownership group, the board of governors, even in the league office. Yes, you have Mark Tatum, who is black, and he is the deputy commissioner of the NBA. So we like that. And we understand that the NBA religiously and historically has gotten good grades from Richard Lapchick and his Sports and Society, and the exceptional job that he does in terms of bringing attention to the racial dynamics that pertains to professional sports, or that involves professional sports. But we also have to understand that as black people, we understand a lot more easily than giving credit for the difference between the public face that you put on something and the reality that exists behind curtains. Like, for example, we've got Mark Tatum as the deputy commissioner. He's earned that job. Very happy for him, very proud of him. I'm assuming that he has significant say, okay? Because Adam Silver is one of the most fair-minded individuals that I know. But you're going to still ask those questions because you always see Adam Silver. You hear about general counsel. You wonder how many black folks are in the NBA league office. You wonder how many black folks are in the NFL league office. And you wonder about how important diversity is as it pertains to decision making and not just putting a face on things. You think about things economically, which is some of the things that was alluded to in this article when you talk about people getting paid. Well, you know, somebody like Russ Granick might have been getting paid $5 to $7 million a year. Is Mark Tatum getting those kind of dollars? I mean, is somebody in the league office for the NFL who happens to be black getting the kind of dollars that their white counterparts get paid? These are kind of questions that people in black America ask all the time with a raised eyebrow or an elevated level of suspicion, because more times than not, we know better. Just like we talk about women doing the same job as men but being underpaid, we can also talk about black men who do the same jobs as their white counterparts, not getting paid. So all of these things factor into that kind of thinking.
All great points. Back to Reverend Hutchins' big picture point. He did say that Adam Silver is still the big picture enemy here because he's not doing enough.
Wrong.
Okay, but I don't want to misrepresent, but he's saying he's still not doing enough to punish these owners, these Donald Sterlings, these Levinsons. And yet, as you point out, and have many times, this commissioner is kicking them out of the fraternity, and that's really all you can do. Now, Reverend Hutchins is saying, yeah, you kick them out, but you allow them to sell for, what was the Clipper sale, $2 billion?
Yes.
Okay?
$2 billion.
Okay, here's the problem. The NBA can't confiscate the team from the man that owns the team just to punish him. It can't say, okay, now we own your team. No, because here's the truth. Here's the cold, hard truth. It's not illegal in this country to be racist. Anybody can be racist. Now, they can't act on their racism as far as threatening or assaulting, obviously, but anybody can be a racist if they so choose to adopt that philosophy. Except if you're in, as you point out, the fraternity of the NBA, fraternity of the NFL, the other owners can say, no, we don't want you and your racist tendencies in our fraternity, in our league, in our cluster, in our group. You're out. But when you're pushed out, forced out, you do have the right to then sell your team. It's because you can't take it back and say, we punish you by what? Would the Reverend want them to remain in the league but be punished by not being able to go to the games? I don't think anybody would want that, right?
Well, see, that's the problem. And that's the problem that I have with, with Reverend Hutchins' statement and with people who take that kind of position. Sir, you're too intelligent to you know better.
Okay.
There's nothing illegal about what Levinson did. How are you going to sit there and say that the investment that he made in the Atlanta Hawks, take it from him, and by the way, he doesn't deserve to be compensated? You know better. And see, it's that level, and the reason why that bothers me, I'm gonna go as far as to say this, Skip. It's a level of ignorance because it's fed off emotion. I'm upset because of what I saw in this man's email.
Sure.
So I want to use words like pervasive. And I want to call Commissioner Adam Silver the enemy. Adam Silver the enemy? The man just banned Donald Sterling for life. Got his team sold for $2 billion. Okay, he's the enemy? What is he supposed to do with Donald Sterling? Donald Sterling bought the team in 1981. Bought it for $12 million. Owned the Los Angeles Clippers for 31 years. And because he spews racially insensitive rhetoric because he's upset and jealous that his mistress likes being around black dudes, this man is going to act like Donald Sterling is supposed to have his club confiscated with him without any compensation? In what world You know that Reverend Hutchins has to be more intelligent than that. He has to know better. But it didn't stop him from spewing it. Adam Silver takes over as commissioner. He's the deputy commissioner for the NBA. He is all about inclusion. He is all about being fair. He is all about being sensitive to the issues and the plight of African Americans as it pertains to his sport. If you read anything about his background, you know this stuff, and you will use the word enemy to describe him. I can disagree with a few things Adam Silver has done off the top of my head, whether it's front and center or behind closed doors. I know more about the man than you realize. But he's a good man. He's incredibly intelligent and competent. And more importantly, the word enemy should never be associated with him. And the fact that this reverend would say that is enough for me to stop right there and dismiss anything he has to say. Because now you're engaging in hyperbole.
All right.
And nobody has time for that.
Skip, wrap this for us.
Bottom line, the best big picture point that has been made here by you in the USA Today article is we desperately need more African American representation in ownership.
Okay.
Now, we know about the executive level.
Okay.
I think there's been some progress on the executive level. Not much progress outside of Michael Jordan on the ownership level. My biggest regret about the Clippers sale, it would have been so just, so fitting if a black ownership group had been able to buy the Clippers, be it Magic or Oprah or Grant Hill or all whoever. Right. It would have been so perfect.
Okay, well,
to sum it up.
You're taking me to where I want to go. There are reports that Dominique Wilkins is actively trying to become the next owner of the Hawks or become a minority owner of the Hawks.
I commute from Schenectady to Manhattan. It's about a 6-hour round trip, but it's cool. My family loves Schenectady, and I love books on tape. It's a lot of time to spend driving alone. On the other hand, Schenectady is really close to the highway, so...
Life is a long drive. Make sure your car is along for the ride. Mobile Super Motor Oil is formulated to help prevent sludge and protect against wear. Mobile Super for long engine life.
So first Donald Sterling, now Bruce Levinson, and according to Bobby Samini, that's Donald Sterling's attorney, there will be even more casualties as a result of the, quote, new racial standard that's been set forth by the National Basketball Association. Here's his quote. We engaged private investigators. It's no secret to anybody. I would never discuss what their findings were or anything of that nature. It wouldn't be appropriate. But what I can tell you is that my sense is that this is just the beginning. There's not a single owner in the league who doesn't have an email, a conversation, a conference call comment that by this standard that's been established by NBA Commissioner Adam Silver, that wouldn't completely taint them. Wow. Stephen A. Samini says this is just the beginning. Your take on it all?
I guess one could easily surmise if you have 29 white owners who are multi-millionaires, some of them being billionaires, and they're all huddled amongst themselves, that the things you hear from some of them could easily be deemed racially insensitive from time to time. Would a black person sitting around as a fly on the wall expect to hear nothing that they would find remotely insensitive or, dare I say, racist? Possibly not. I don't think there's any question that even though I'm not going to say somebody would be as excessive as Donald Sterling was, and certainly not for the petty, ridiculous reasons that Donald Sterling was that way, one could easily say, sure, I'm quite sure I'd hear something racially insensitive. But I'm going to go back. There's a difference between being racially insensitive and racist. And I think by and large, when I look at the NBA, I think about a Mark Cuban. I think about a Peter Holt. I think about a Mickey Arison. And I talk to Mickey Arison a lot every time I see him. He's one of my favorite people in all of the NBA. I've heard negative things said about David Stern. Well, how did the league, over 70% black, become a multi-billion-dollar establishment? It's because David Stern was fighting on behalf of those very black players who didn't always have the most fondest things to say about him. I think we need to be careful about wondering, oh, are there more Donald Sterlings? Let's go with the facts. The fact is that there hasn't been another Donald Sterling revealed. Even with Levinson's email, it's a crime to me, to Levinston, for him to be mentioned in the same breath as Donald Sterling. He had an email. On the email, he talked about black attendance at the club, 90%. In the audience, 7%, 70%. He looked at that, looked at the cheerleaders. Don't happen to be any white ones. On top of it all, you're talking about white Southerners. They're in the heart of that area in Atlanta. Okay, it's a lot of them around. But they're not buying Hawk tickets. They're buying Thrashers tickets. They're showing up at the Falcons game. They're showing up at the Braves game. But they're not patronizing the Hawks product. Why is that? And to ask the question, he's being labeled a racist? Come on now. We got to be bigger than that. We just have to be. It's not perfect. I get it. And mistakes are going to be made. And things to be interpreted as racially insensitive. But Richard Lapchick talked about the grades that the NBA usually gets. It being 76% black. We see Michael Jordan as an owner. I don't see any black dudes owning an NFL team or a Major League Baseball team. Why are we talking about the NBA? They've been front runners in the world in the issues of diversity. They have globalized their brand more successfully than any sports league in North America because of diversity and because of their willingness to embrace it. Not just blacks, with Hispanics, Europeans, etc. The list goes on and on. So again, it's not perfect, and I'm quite sure we could find some things that would rub us the wrong way. But in no way should that mean that the NBA should be perceived as racist. I am not just a black man, Skip. I'm a brother and proud of it. And I'm telling you something right now. If I thought for 1 second the NBA was racist, I would not want to cover the league. I'd want no part of it. And I believe that I have the diverse skill sets to work somewhere else.
I hear you, and I agree with you because I know you. So let's quickly look at what is this attorney for Donald Sterling's agenda and motivation here. They have an ongoing lawsuit against the NBA, and as the USA Today article points out, new evidence of similar speech offenses by other owners, and they are trying to uncover those, would only bolster their case. Which is why I do not love the blanket condemnation delivered by this attorney that every owner would have a similar speech offense if you had all of the emails and all the phone calls and all the whatever communications, that they all do it. I'm not buying that. And I do love your differentiation between racially insensitive and racist.
Two different.
Maybe there would be some instances that Stephen A. Smith would sit back and say, well, that's racially insensitive. And maybe there would be a few you'd say, that's flat out racist. But is the NBA,
right,
are we to be led to believe that the NBA has 29 other racist running franchises? I'm not buying that. And you're not buying that because you know too many owners, and I have known too many owners over time. And maybe out of naivete, they might have a slip of the tongue that you would say, you can't say that. That doesn't come across right. You know, be careful with that.
Well, no, and you're very aware of that. You'll say, I don't know if I can say that. That's why you're very differential. Stephen A. you go.
Yeah.
You tell me how that is. You let me know.
Okay. But bottom line, a lot of this is with what they call saber rattling. You're trying to instill fear that there are skeletons in every closet that are about to be dragged out into the national media spotlight, and we're still waiting, Sterling and company and attorneys. We're still waiting.
We have a problem. We have one incident, that's a problem. And what we want to do is, by the policy that we implemented 2 weeks ago, is say, we haven't done this right. We have had lots of conversations, lots of listening and learning right here in this room with experts, not just in the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks or month, but over the last couple of years, to say, how can we deal with this issue better? How can we prevent the cases from happening? And when they do happen, how can we send the right message to say this is unacceptable?
How can we send the right message to say that this is unacceptable? Roger Goodell saying that the NFL most definitely has a domestic violence problem. That was on CBS this morning. Stephen A., big picture, what does the NFL do from this point on?
Well, they enforce the rules that are on the books, and they enforce them vehemently. Definitely a deterrent has been established by the implementation of this new domestic violence policy that calls for an automatic 6-game suspension for first-time offenders and a lifetime ban for second-time offenders. So as long as you enforce the rules that are on the books, you do that. But you also make sure that you point out violence of any kind will not be tolerated. We don't want to be associated with violence of any kind in this league or in our society. We need to talk about it with everybody. And it's just that simple. And as long as you do that and you make sure that the laws are being enforced, I don't think there will be a problem.
Well said. Now, before I say what I would like to say, let me preface with one thing I have learned in my many years. When it comes to analyzing what goes on between a couple, even if the couple might be friends of yours, is just impossible to know, which is why we are all hesitant and should be hesitant to try to analyze Janae Palmer Rice's role in this. I'm steering away because I don't know. I really don't know the backstory, the backdrop, what really has gone on between those two. I'm out. I steer clear. But I found it fascinating what Janae, in her Instagram post yesterday, wrote. And I don't know if we want to put this up or I'll just read the portion that...
Oh, yeah, they have it up. Go ahead.
Okay, they have it up. The portion that really caught my eye, and I found it extremely moving. No one knows the pain that the media and unwanted opinions from the public have caused my family to make us relive a moment in our lives that we regret every day is a horrible thing. I hear that. But here's the bigger picture. Very possibly at Janae's expense and her family's expense, this has been a crucial and important turn of events in the enlightenment, the public enlightenment and focus upon domestic violence. It had been swept under the national carpet far, far too long. And it took an incident involving our biggest, greatest sport, the National Football League, for all of us to focus, to look harder, to look under the carpet at all the issues, the slippery slope that it can be, but to think about it, to digest it, and to say, aha, I've learned a lot about the abusers and the abused, which is why Carrie pointed out the great hashtags.
Right.
For once, thank you, Twitter. There are times I don't like Twitter,
right.
but yesterday it was a big thank you, Twitter. This was so important to have the hashtags, why I stayed, why I left.
Yeah.
I read it, and I kept thinking, okay, I've read enough, and I would read another tweet, and I'd say, aha,
okay, so
I didn't know that.
As a man reading that, your thoughts, why I stayed, why I left.
Well, again, I don't want to get into the gory detail of it, but I was enlightened. I learned from a female perspective, and occasionally from a male perspective, why this happened, and why they stayed, and why they regretted. And it was chilling to me. And I thought about it all the rest of the day and all the rest of the night. So again, this is just me personally, from my heart. I got my issues, I got my flaws. This is not one of them. So I don't know much about it, and I can't relate at all to striking a woman. It's not in my DNA. Yeah. But I learned so much about the women who have been struck and how they reacted and finally regretted. And it was a beautiful thing that Twitter provided on the fly, an instantaneous reaction
to what happened.
To what happened. And so my big picture point is, God bless her and her family.
Yes.
And I feel for the pain she's feeling because, again, to a certain extent, at her expense, this has become a big national great issue.
It's a teachable moment.
That's to put it lightly.
It is a teachable moment. It's unfortunate, as you mentioned, or fortunate that it had to be at her expense, and I understand her 100%. She feels as if we are doing this to profit, but again, I said it earlier in the show, it's bigger now than Janae Rice. It's bigger than Ray Rice. There's a face, there is evidence, there is something we can do, because again, if you don't see the abuse, it doesn't happen. It is just a story talked about, written about, a problem that they have to deal with, the NFL has to deal with. Now, it's right here it's at your front door. And like Ray Rice said earlier, Roger Goodell said earlier, he said they set society standards. He's taking a responsibility, and as Stephen A., and I'll bring it back to you, they now have to start enforcing those rules. Well, they have a lot of cases that they can do that with. We got Hardy coming up. We got Ray McDonald coming up. We have to see if the NFL is now going to enforce these new rules, these stricter penalties that they say they put in place based on what they now know because they've received an education.
That's true, but at the same time, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm very uncomfortable having this discussion right at this particular moment, Skip, Kerry. Here's why. I looked at the email from Janae Palmer Rice. My heart went out to her. To hear her words and the way she delivered them, it was devastating. I said on the air on my radio show yesterday, it almost made me cry thinking about, what she was saying. And I'm not the most emotional dude in the world. I'm passionate, but I'm not one for shedding tears too often. But just imagining what she is having to endure and seeing Canty and his reaction, your heart went out for her. But then you hear different things about what transpired, and you can't talk about those things. In this particular case, you shouldn't, because the video showing what Ray Rice did, there's nothing to discuss. But then the other side to it is that you have people from the domestic violence community that would sit there and they wanted to point the finger at her in a negative light because of the stance she took in defense of her family and her husband. And the fact that we didn't get into it, I had women attacking me for that, saying, why didn't you bring that up? Why didn't you talk about it? And so as we're sitting here expressing our thoughts and opinions and all of this other stuff, I guess for me, I'm asking, how real can we be? Because everybody wants to say, well, let's hear different thoughts, but we really don't. We really don't want to hear anything. This is the right thing to say. This is the right position to take. And I'm not talking about Ray Rice hitting her. That video is that video. It speaks a gazillion words. But when you talk about the issue of domestic violence, there is so much that it entails. And the people within the domestic violence community are divided in terms of what they want you to say and what they want other people not to say. And as a result of it, you can't have a real conversation. And to me, if you can't have a real conversation, why bother conversing? Why bother?
Well, maybe not right now.
You don't hit a woman.
Maybe not right now, Stephen.
Yeah,
you bring up a good point. Maybe not right now, but there could be. We could be doing something right now. We could be starting a conversation. It may not be comfortable, but it could get there. I don't know. It could get there.
Well, I
don't know. I hope so.
I still say.
I hope so. I hope so.
Big picture, this has been a great week for the enlightenment of a nation about domestic violence.
Floyd Mayweather, who spent 2 months in a Las Vegas jail back in 2012 for pleading guilty to reduce domestic abuse charges stemming from an attack on his former girlfriend while children watched, is also weighing in on Ray Rice. He said he believes that the NFL should have stayed with its original 2-game suspension, and as for his innocence or guilt when it comes to domestic violence, he says he was falsely accused. Here's a quote. Like I've said in the past, no bumps, no bruises, no nothing. With OJ and Nicole, you've seen pictures. With Chris Brown and Rihanna, you've seen pictures. With Chad, Ocho Cinco, and Evelyn, you've seen pictures. You've seen the quote. You read it earlier. We're putting Floyd Mayweather on the hook. Skip Bayless, what do you make of what he's saying?
To me, Stephen A. and Kerry, this is quite obviously and painfully callous, cold-blooded, brazen, arrogant denial. But again, this kind of chilling behavior and reaction on Floyd's part is behavior that's consistent with a serial domestic abuser. And in a way, it actually helps you put a face on an abuser. This is how they often respond over time. He's a 3-time loser in courts of law. And yet, does that mean I'm going to boycott Floyd's fight on Saturday night? Nope, I'm going to watch, because I've been able to sort of force myself over the years, having known a lot of entertainers and a lot of athletes, to separate the athlete-entertainer from the flawed human, because many, if not most of them, are deeply flawed. In Floyd's case, this is, to me, his deepest flaw. Stephen A. knows him very well. Stephen A. likes this man. I respect that. We both love to watch him box. We will watch him on Saturday night. But this is reprehensible but predictable reaction to me from Floyd Mayweather Jr.
I wish I could say it was predictable. It wasn't predictable. I think that considering the fact that he had to do time after pleading no contest to the domestic violence charge and what have you, I think and serving about 60 to 90 days in jail, you would think that he would be wise enough to avoid saying such a thing, recognizing that it would come across as inflammatory and incendiary, and he didn't do that. And it makes no sense whatsoever. And again, the Floyd Mayweather I know, you put your hands on one of his daughters, you're going to have a problem. There's no question about it. And so, you know, when you consider that and you consider what he's gone through in the past, although he vehemently expresses his own innocence despite the pleas, you know, him serving time and what have you, he's always said that he's been innocent of the charges that have been leveled against him. In the end, nobody's trying to hear that. You did time. You did time for domestic violence. That's the bottom line. And so knowing that, why do anything to bring attention to yourself on this particular issue at this moment in time? It's unwise, it's ill-advised, it's insensitive, it's wrong. And again, I love Floyd Mayweather, the fighter. I think he's the best on the planet. As a person, I know a lot of his demons. I've been put in a situation where I'm one of the few people he has confided in, and I'll never reveal some of the demons he's expressed to me because that's for him to reveal. That's his personal business, unless he gave me permission to do so. But I will tell you that even with all of that being said, all that means to me is that he should have an even more heightened level of sensitivity, and he clearly did not in this particular situation. I'm disappointed. I'm upset at him, and he knows me well enough to know that when I see him, I'm going to say something to him about it, because it's just not even called for him to take this kind of position and express those kind of sentiments, particularly at this time.
All right.
So, Kerry Champion.
Yes, so.
Sum this up for us. Your reaction initially to these quotes, and can you move past them to the point that you could again watch this man do what he does best, which is box?
Well, my initial reaction, Stephen A. says he was maybe surprised, a little caught off guard. I was not. Floyd Mayweather has a very long documented history of being disrespectful to women. It's not a surprise. Again, I said he gets a pass because he's such a skilled fighter, and people do appreciate who he is in the ring, and people appreciate greatness. We talked about it.
Sure.
You just said you can separate the two. Unfortunately, it becomes extremely difficult to separate the two when you know so much about the personal. It's hard to separate the personal and the professional. I stick to trying not to let my personal business sway into my professional business because you can't separate them. As far as watching him, yeah, of course, I'll watch him. And you know, maybe it's hypocritical, maybe it's not right, but it is what we do. And we can't say we won't watch. For me to sit here and say I'm not going to watch another Floyd Mayweather fight is not honest. But I will say I don't respect him as a human being. I think the way that he dismisses women and the way he's completely disrespectful toward women and think that it's okay, it just isn't okay. For him to be so blatantly arrogant and mention a dead woman's name as if it was no big deal.
Yeah.
This woman is dead. She has a family. Are you kidding me? So no, that's how I feel about him. But yeah, sadly, I have to separate the two and watch.
And you did make a great point earlier in the show that because Floyd does not play in a team sport,
no,
he cannot be disciplined or punished by his league because there is no league.
There is no league, and quite frankly, this arrogance and this is a part of his attraction. This is why people do enjoy watching him. This is why people do want to see him fight. Stephen A. made that point earlier. You know, it's like I am. Go ahead.
Well, that's a big point right there, because remember years ago when Floyd was winning fights and he was undefeated, but didn't make nearly as much noise. He wasn't blowing, he wasn't setting pay-per-view records. Let's keep that in mind as well. It's one thing for you to be the way that you are. It's another thing for you to be rewarded for it, because the sport literally encourages some of this stuff, because that's how they make money. So as wrong as Floyd Mayweather may appear in this, and there's no question that in this particular instance he is wrong, let's also keep in mind, whether it's the Adrian Broners of the world or various other individuals with their bravado or what have you, the mild-mannered dudes that just go about the business of doing their job and being elite don't sell nearly as much. Andre Ward may be number 2 on the list of pound-for-pound fighters in the world. This dude is on another level, okay? Let me tell you something right now. You don't hear much about Andre Ward. He's doing great work as a boxing analyst with HBO. He's a champion. He's got his issues in court with Lou DiBella and those boys. I think Goose, and I don't remember which one it is, but I'm just simply saying that he's a model citizen, family man, upstanding guy, polished, incredibly celebratory in terms of who we want, who we would root for, etc. You don't hear much about him. But when you're loud, brash, and you can back it up, particularly in the sport of boxing where there's no union, there's no fighter representation, there's no fighter union or anything like that to protect these guys, you've got power brokers who are encouraging them to be the way that they are because it sells. So is the problem at its core really with those individuals, on the individuals overseeing the sport and them, whether it be the promoters or whoever else, or Joe Public, who buys the tickets?
I started the show, I said domestic violence is uncomfortable. This is one of these uncomfortable conversations. The sad reality of who this man is and the fact that we'll still watch him, but we know, as you said, he's the face of an abuser. Some breaking news here on the show. The National Organization for Women is calling for Commissioner Roger Goodell to resign because of how the NFL handled the Ray Rice case. According to a statement from the now president, Terry O'Neill, let me read it in part. It says the NFL has lost its way. It doesn't have a Ray Rice problem, and it has a violence against women problem. The only workable solution is for Roger Goodell to resign and for his successor to appoint an independent investigator with full authority to gather factual data about domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking within the NFL community, and to recommend real and lasting reforms. Wow. Again, this just breaking from the National Organization for Women. Skip Bayless, your take.
Off the top of my head, Stephen A., I said yesterday that Roger Goodell's job should be in jeopardy, and now the heat has been turned way up by a very powerful organization and force. And I remind you, about 50% of NFL fans are female. So, as we know, the NFL is a very powerful and arrogant organization. Will this make a dent? Will this have an impact? I'm not so sure about that, but I think it should have a big impact. And I'm leaning more and more, day after day, toward that Roger Goodell should resign.
Wow.
Absent of us discovering that Roger Goodell saw the video, tried to hide it, acted as if he never saw it, and gave Ray Rice a 2-game suspension only. Absent of those realities, or those discoveries rather, I'm sorry, I think this woman is off her rocker. I think she's lost her mind. That's right, I said it. This is the most ridiculous nonsense I've ever heard in my life. Roger Goodell deserves to lose his job because, why are you acting like he's Ray Rice? Roger Goodell did not hit Janae Palmer Rice. He hasn't hit any women. And by the way, last time I checked, Skip, why are we talking about the NFL as if it's some cesspool for domestic violence? There's a few cases. It's being dealt with. It needs to be dealt with harshly, etc., etc. There are 1,800 players in the NFL. By and large, most acting like model citizens, never getting in any kind of trouble. What the hell is this?
All right, we got to wrap.
And because this happens and he mishandled it, he's got to go?
Okay, but
that's crazy.
Okay, but there have been many cases in the past that have been swept under the carpet. Terrell Suggs' case was one. So I think that...
You mean when Paul Tagliabue was commissioner?
No.
Or the commissioner before him?
No, not when
everything wasn't on Roger Goodell's watch.
Incidents.
Well, it's 1,800 players.
Thank you. I think this is going to have a major
impact. This man deserves to lose his career because of this? He deserves to lose his career because of this. Because the National Organization for Women are going to come out and try to treat Roger Goodell like he has committed domestic violence?
Well,
he made a mistake. He needs to be called on the carpet for it. He needs to be called to the carpet for it. I get that, but to lose his job, his career, to suffer the same punishment as Ray Rice.
Yeah, again, the information just breaking from the National Organization of Women.
Ridiculous.
They are calling for Roger Goodell's resignation. Obviously, we need a minute for this to settle before we can make some definitive comments. Stephen A. says it's ridiculous. Skip Bayless.
Tell him to call into my show.
Doesn't feel like they are too far off. We're going to leave it here. Heated debate will continue tomorrow. 10 a.m. Eastern on ESPN2.
Ridiculous.